Perhaps to start off with a dose of optimism. The global economy has grown every single year since 1950, except of course 2009 and 2020. Growth is an inherent part of global economic performance. Admittedly, there is some levels of inequality with regard to the locations of growth, the people ensnared by growth, and of course time differences. But perhaps that's a very good departure point. More people will go to the polls this year than ever before. This comes with a backdrop of growing illiberalism, a sense that many foundational institutions are under assault, and also a youth that feels disenfranchised, disenchanted. Elections tend to inject uncertainty, and we think that in 2024, that uncertainty will probably shave about 0.3 of a percentage point of economic growth. Now, moving on from elections, and with emphasis on global economic growth, there is a sense that global economic growth this year is going to be just the right temperature, not too hot, not too cold, just right. We anticipate that the US economy will slow from roughly 3% to around 2.5% this year. That is a precarious soft landing to the extent that it is subject to a variety of risks, perhaps foremost geopolitical shocks. So we're calling it an immaculate soft landing. With respect to South Africa, this year will capture our imaginations in what we've called Season 7. We suspect that the ANC may just fall below 50%. And in that respect, it would imply that President Ramaphosa is likely to secure and serve a second term. Of course, if the ANC were to fall more seismically, then small or independent parties would not be sufficient for the ANC to be able to build a 200-plus seat coalition in Parliament. We do anticipate, however, that there would be quite tectonic shifts in terms of the provincial poll outcomes. Here we anticipate quite plausibly that the ANC in at least 4 provinces could lose its majority by a substantial amount. For some time now, the political climate has been bedeviling of growth, and this is not just confined to uncertainty with regard to the policy path, but also the functioning of state-owned entities. We do think there'll be some improvement, and the momentum with regard to at least putting Transnet on a more restorative path will garner additional impetus. Specifically with regard to the Eskom path, we think that 2024 will deliver lower load shedding. In fact, we would be so bold as to suggest that in the first half of this year, it is plausible that load shedding could be roughly 1.5 stages lower than the worst of last year. The rand is likely to reflect a level of political angst. In other words, while we know for some time now the rand has been cheap, and by cheap we mean it has been weaker than its fundamentals would suggest it should be trading at least in the build-up to elections, the rand is still going to incorporate that risk premium. A weaker dollar could also be some level of buttress for the rand. The stable rand in turn provides a favorable backdrop for the inflation path. Combined with reduced pressures from food, fuel, wages, and just aggregate demand, inflation is likely to continue to decelerate close to around 4.5% by the end of this year. That then opens up the possibility that the Reserve Bank could lower interest rates, in fact by a cumulative 1 percentage point over the course of 2024. Sewing all this together, we are slightly optimistic that in fact the second half of 2024 especially will deliver fairly favorable prognosis, in the sense that economic growth will accelerate, electricity shortcomings, power rationing, will be markedly diminished. The likelihood of the rand staging some appreciation is plausible, and for the most part, the inflation and interest rate prognosis will be easier on consumers. In conclusion, while there's good reason to cheer, we would also suggest buckling up.